So I hope you guys had a good break, got some refreshments. I'd like to introduce our next moderator. His name's Mike Tesler for our next panel, What's New in Product Development. So I'd like to hand it over to him.
Thank you, and good morning. Transform. There was another slide that had the word change. And in marketing and in the CMT in particular, we embrace change. And in embracing change, I think it's exemplified by our CMT director, Ian Cross. Ian, are you here?
He's right there.
Ian. Ian's right there. Everyone turn around and take a look at Ian. Earlier today, we're talking about embracing change, Ian. And earlier today, Ian said if left alone to ask questions as moderator, and I was watching him closely because I've never been a moderator before and I wanted to learn from the expert. But so I was listening closely, and Ian said if left alone to ask questions up here, he would become Stephen Colbert. Well, when he first came here, he became Mike Myers, AKA Austin Powers, Man of Mystery. Now he's saying he does Colbert, but I think he's much more John Oliver. He lives transform and change, as does the CMT. The CMT is where talent incubates, then accelerates, leaves and does great stuff. Three who are bringing that great stuff back here today are Chris Bryant. He's Chris Bryant with Endurance International Group, where he's a product marketing manager. I didn't know what Endurance International Group was, but then I was told they have 4 major units, one of which is Constant Contact, which I'm very familiar with, which I'm sure many of you are as well. Dennis Brosnan with Sonos, where he's a partnering insights manager and consumer intelligence.
Correct.
I'm an intelligent consumer. So. Fiona Kelman, ACT Senior Customer Insights Manager. So we're good to go. We're going to start with Chris Bryant.
Awesome. So I think what I'll do is spend just a couple minutes explaining our organization, because as you so kindly mentioned, it's kind of complex, and if we're talking about transformation, our organization has changed a ton in a 2-year period. So for the first slide here, it's nice and black so everyone can see it. Good. So that says domains, hosting, website building, and email marketing. It didn't look like that on my screen, so I apologize. And these are the 4 major brands that we represent at Endurance International Group. Constant Contact largely does all of our email marketing and powers that. It's a SaaS-based company. The others are a mix of infrastructure as a service and software as a service between Bluehost, HostGator, and Domain.com. The reason our organization is so complex is because, as many of you probably know, Constant Contact was its own company and then acquired a couple of years ago by Endurance International Group, and is now one of the many business units under Endurance. Change is kind of slow here. There we go. So just to I thought what would be helpful as we talk about transformation, and just to help people understand kind of at a macro scale, like how many different products and types of solutions we're talking about, is to show you guys the list of competitors that live in our space, and I think many brands you're going to recognize right off the bat. So companies like GoDaddy, Wix, MailChimp, Squarespace, Weebly, These are all massive companies that specialize in website building, email editing, marketing automation, and innovation. And they're core competitors to pretty much all of the products in our portfolio. And one of really the biggest challenges that's facing our organization and many of the organizations behind me is trying to find ways to pull all of those tools together into a seamless product experience that consumers can use. So we primarily target small businesses, but we also go after individual consumers like yourselves who have an idea and say, hey, this could become something that I make money on, either on the side from my profession or as potentially a small business of my own someday. And our challenge is really to put together marketing tools that you can say, hey, I can start a website today, I can market tomorrow, and I can have a profitable business next week or the week after that. But of course, there's a lot of products, a lot of solutions that go into making that happen. So this is my third and final slide, but I think we can spend a couple minutes on it. So really the model that I think everybody's seen before, and I won't go into theory too much here, is just the jobs to be done model. It's something that we kind of preach as gospel within our organization, because at the end of the day, we have to take it back to what do consumers really want? What are they trying to do? And I think largely those things haven't changed, right? So small business still want to sell more stuff, or nonprofit organizations still want to give more donations or more charitable giving, right? But the challenge that we have as an organization is making that easier, making that seamless, and making it something that's efficient from a cost perspective. So what I put here on the right is just a quick diagram to tell you some of the product areas that we really focus on for that. We focus on customization, personalization, and automation. And really trying to bring those converging concepts together. So customization is an example, like you guys could go into Constant Contact today and spend a couple hours customizing the email exactly the way you want it, right? Personalization is something where hey, every email that I send to somebody, it has their name at the top automatically for me. So it personalizes that communication. And then automation is being able to kind of set it and forget it, right? It's like, hey, I know if somebody clicks on something or purchases something, they're going to get an automated message. In response to that, it helps me either sell more stuff or maintain that customer long term. The challenge we have is those things traditionally were all separate tools. You had your marketing automation tools, you had tools that enabled you to customize everything, and then you had some personalization tools that allowed you to segment your audience. Our largest challenge is saying, hey, how can we create a portfolio of products that enable people to pull in consumers they know they have or market to new consumers, collect them, segment that, and send automated communication effectively without losing that personal touch that they had before. So in a 5-minute kind of ramble, I think that's largely what our organization is trying to solve for today, and that of many of our competitors that I showed you on the previous screen.
Thank you.
Keep going.
So next
Yeah,
we have Dennis.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to stand as well so I can see. All right, so my name is Dennis Brosnan. I work at Sonos here in Boston. Before I go any further, I'd like to just do a quick poll and understand who here, I guess with the show of hands, has heard of Sonos? Nice, okay. And which of you that have raised your hands have either used the product or have the product? Great, okay, so there's a few. I'll explain for the rest what we do and why you should listen to me. So Sonos lives in the wireless space, the home audio space. About 13 years ago, we came out with these products. Back then, this was revolutionary technology that allowed you to play any speaker in any room of your house and play whatever you wanted on the speakers, right? So you could have some Led Zeppelin in the kitchen, you could have Beatles in the bathroom, and you were able to do that through technology that we provided on the platform called Sonos. And you could also, if you wanted to, have your whole home playing the same music at the same time, which 13 years ago was revolutionary, right? Things have kind of changed now. We own the patents for it, but it came from our portfolio. We also allow you to consolidate music services. So if you want to use your Sonos system, for example, and say I use Spotify and my girlfriend uses Apple Music, and you want to use a podcasting app and maybe TuneIn Radio for your BBC radio that Ian mentioned, you can have all of those in one places on the app, and then you can actually stream that music to your Sonos system across your home. Again, now in 2018, that kind of seems like great, everyone's doing that, but we were the team that started this technology and what it means. So My presentation today, or my quick spiel, is about fighting Goliaths, and I'll explain what that means in a second. But before we go down that path, I'd like to quickly travel back far to 2014. This is when I started at Sonos. Kudos if anyone knows who that is here. Thank you. It's like complete silence. Yeah. So, okay, so back in 2014, Sonos was competing with two major things, right? First was Bose, so which I'm sure everyone's heard of, right? Bose makes a lot of things, huge company here in Framingham. And also Bluetooth. And I know that's a technology, so you're saying, Dennis, why are you comparing a Sonos brand to Bluetooth? But a few years ago, the battle was trying to make people understand the benefit of Wi-Fi audio versus Bluetooth audio. And I'll explain this very simply. So with Wi-Fi audio, you are able to, for example, stream anything from your phone to any devices you like in your home. And say you left, right? The music keeps going, people in the house can still enjoy that, and that's just the way it works. It works over your wireless network, so there's no tethering to your phone at all, which is great. Bluetooth, if anyone has used this, and I'm sure we've all had those experiences where you have your phone connected, you're trying to listen to something, the Bluetooth maybe doesn't sound great, it's cutting in and out, you go to the bathroom, it shuts off, it comes back, your mom calls you, like it gets into a mess. And so we were, a few years ago, really trying to just educate the consumer to why our products, why Wi-Fi audio is so much better than Bluetooth technology, right? Which is great, things were going pretty well. And then things changed, specifically this, not a mouth, but voice in particular. So voice, what I mean by that, essentially was this product here, right? The Amazon Echo, which I'm sure everyone has heard of and maybe used at this point. Since then, they've obviously come out with a lot more products and different form factors and prices, but this was the first one that they actually came out with. Following them was the Google Home, and then after them, HomePod, and at this point, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of competitors that do similar things. Everyone's throwing the Amazon Echo spaghetti against the wall. So the question becomes, right, a company the size of Sonos, which is pretty small compared to these guys, so how does a company like Sonos compete against three of the world's largest companies who have essentially limitless budget, power, influence, anything, right? They can do pretty much anything at this point. And what I wanted to talk to you today about primarily was the idea of experience centricity and why that's really important for new product development, and also the way that you think about how to interact with your customers and the market research you do and that market research you use to then market to new and existing customers. This is the Sonos One. This came out about 5 months ago, and the Sonos One is our first voice platform, our first product into this voice platform space, right? It allows you to use Alexa on there like you would with a Google Home, or I'm sorry, the Amazon Dot. But also, the way that we are coming at this product is similar to the way that we came at the music services, right? So, like I mentioned, you can use any service on our platform. Google doesn't necessarily want you to do that. Apple doesn't want you to do that. Amazon doesn't want you to do that because they have their own services, right? They're trying to keep you in that ecosystem. We break down ecosystems by allowing you to use any of those. On top of that, we're going to start having more than one voice assistant on this platform. For now, you can only use Amazon Alexa, but eventually you'll be able to use things like Google Assistant on there as well, so you can pick and choose, which is great, and no one else is doing that. So the three major things that I really kind of wanted to bring to the table here is using market research and understanding to drive three key experiences. So the first one at Sonos that we think a lot about is that the experience comes first. That is actually one of our core values at our company and what we stand for. When you first day you get there, you get three things that you take with you. It's like a booklet, and this is the first thing that they drill into your head, and it's true, right? So figuring out how you can better the experience in whatever facet you're working on to better the experience for the actual customer, whether it be product, whether it be communication, setup experience, calling customer care, whatever it is, make sure that experience is really on point and use your marketing to really tailor to that. The second is customer advocacy. So as marketers, we need to be the voice of the customer, right? Market research, it's our job to understand what's out there, what's happening, and what we can do to better our own owners. Not everyone in the company is thinking that way, so we have to come to the table with those thoughts and with that actual tangible information that we can go off and use. And the third one is find your niche. I mentioned before that the Sonos One, we're playing in this Switzerland kind of game, right? We're being very neutral across all these, and it's figuring out not only on a product area, but also with your marketing, your messaging, your advertising, how you can find your niche and really start trying to drive differentiation between us and the biggest three companies in the world. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Fiona?
This is going to be interesting. I have two things to deal with here, microphone and a clicker, right? So my name is Fiona Kelman, and I work for the ACT, which is an assessment company for any of those that took the SAT. I mean, ACT is obviously the competitor. What you probably don't know about ACT is that's only 50% of their product line. They do a lot more assessment products and workplace management. We're getting into social emotional learning, adaptive learning. We've acquired a lot of companies recently, and we're poising ourselves to be one of the biggest education analytical companies in the future. And so for what I do, ACT is out of Iowa City, and when we talk about innovation, you know, I'm in marketing insights and customer insights. My whole team's remote. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have a UX team as well. They're all remote as well. And half of our product management team is also remote. So what's great about ACT is that they recognize they want the best talent, they want top performers, and you're not going to convince someone to move from the East Coast or the West Coast or some bigger cities to Iowa City. So that's where I work. And what I wanted to talk about is new product development, because I think it's a little bit different than some other players, especially because we do assessments. So we're really into design on data and reporting, which is the deliverables that we give to both B2C and our B2B clients. But I put competitive and market intelligence and market research here is because I don't remember really focusing on competitive intelligence when I was at Bentley getting my MSMA, and it is crucial with market research. You know, I'm head of primary research at ACT, but my counterpart is head of competitive intelligence. And everything that we do, especially with new product development, from the start of a design sprint, when we're thinking about new products, or in addition to one of our assessments, competitive intelligence landscaping works in partnership with what I do, which is you know, primary research. Also, I have user experience up there because a lot of companies separate. I think, is it still called human factors here at Bentley? A lot of companies separate UX from market research, and we don't. I mean, we work we don't compete with each other. We work in conjunction with each other. Every survey that we do, there is a UX and market research person on. When we do qualitative interviewing one-on-one, whether it's on user experience or market research, we are very much a team. And so I just wanted to spend some time going over these three components and how they work at ACT. So the competitive intelligence workflow, you know, initially monitor, scan. I mean, there's so much competition out there, and that's you know, vital for us. Environmental scan on competitors and market size, news and press releases, trying to find out what companies are buying other companies by looking at their annual reports, so we can guesstimate what they're potentially doing in the future. Gather intelligence, assessing CI needs across proactive CI planning. Repository, my counterpart made me include this. I had her review this slide, and she said it's not only important to have CI research, but keep it somewhere where everyone can get access to it. I think the same as market research too, and I'm the worst at doing that on the repository side, but that is a key part of great market research, great UX, and great competitive intelligence. And finally, analyze and interpret market sizing, SWOT. I mean, we supporters, 5 forces, different kinds of analysis, ecosystem, and scenario planning. All goes into our competitive intelligence, which is part of market research. This is the market research workflow, which is your traditional workflow, which is you know, what I do. You intake, which is a request made from someone, usually internally, right? Consider available and appropriate team resources, whether I'm going to work with product managers, product developers, UX, CI, you know, who we're going to bring in. Scoping, design, and kickoff, right? Developing a research brief. I mean, that's crucial. What's the objective of this project? What do you want? And if what we are designed to do, is that going to meet what you want? I mean, one of the biggest things too, let's not just do research for research's sake. Let's do research and prove to me and prove to the rest of us how you're using it and what changes it has made. RFP process, whether we're going to vend out or whether we're going to do it internally. We do both. We do a lot of research internally, and we also vend out to other big market research companies. Question design, I still do a ton of survey design. I do a lot of concept testing with price sensitivity. So concept testing using Van West, Gaber Granger, and some other pricing models. So I'm huge in traditional market research survey design. Then data analysis and statistics. My friend and former colleague Sonia and I were out for lunch yesterday, and I think she was surprised that I still run data sometimes in SPSS. So I use SPSS, and I'm happy for the econometrics classes that I took here at Bentley.
I do too.
Yeah, you do? Yeah. And then finally, reporting and deliverables. And then my last piece here, we'll go back to the user experience workflow. You got it? Okay. So, it's similar to the workflow of market research. Why, when you see it here, I think that it parallels with us. Is again, you frame requests received from someone about what they'd like to do, and framing that. Research and analysis, ecosystem research, user review, design thinking sessions. UX is really big on that. They all meet together and do a lot of strategy. Concept and detailed synthesis. That includes design, navigation, and content design. Again, a lot of design thinking sessions and user research. And finally, UX review and user research deliverables, which are usually with market research deliverables.
So thank you. As I said earlier, 3 people doing great stuff. And as you heard, 3 very different companies. So marketing executives doing very different things as their companies required. And as we frequently tell our students, your education here isn't a template that you can just go in and apply to a job, because, using my favorite word again, change, you have to change, transform, and adapt to the specific needs of, as Fiona said, that competitive environment you're in. So, questions?
So, yes. So earlier you stated that your organization, UX, is part of your group. Why do you think that so many organizations actually have UX separate?
I don't know. So my background before going to ACT, I was at Gallup, and then I was at Freddie Mac, and so those 2 companies didn't have UX divisions. I don't know why they're separate. I think there's some people in the crowd here that are in UX or in the program here. Even in 2010, when I started Bentley for my MSMA, I remember hearing about human factors, and I was like, wait a minute. Should I be getting a dual thing in human factors and market research? Because these kind of seem like they play in the same, sandbox with each other. I don't know. I don't know why you would have that. I think when you segment like that and you have teams in different locations and not working together, there's probably a lot of duplicative data that's not being shared and a waste of time. That's what I would think, but maybe there's some UX people out here that would think differently. Yes?
Maybe a very short answer. Well, you also have development teams, right? And you don't want to mix them all up. They all have their place, what they're doing, what methods they're using, but obviously they need to work together. So I have no problem if you put the research from marketing and UX together, but they have different methods, and they, it's a great combination, but I think typically it's not necessary. And so there's no need. You also don't want to put the developers in there either, right?
Oh no, developers not in market research.
And our, at Sonos as well, our UX research team, my team, the consumer intelligence team, is more traditional market research, and the UX research team is separate, different part of the company. And you're right, to your point with the developers, right? They kind of sit in the middle there between the 2. The way that we at Sonos at least think about it as well is that UX research is typically earlier in the product development funnel, at least from software development purposes. They're the ones that are getting before even beta, right? Figuring out things that need to be thought about in the app design or new experiences they want to develop. And they're the ones that are doing that research there. Then it goes through beta development, and then we kind of take it after that and figure out what's happening when it gets out to the real world, and then feedback loop back to them, right? It's almost like a circle.
Yeah, and I think marketing definitely needs to come early on because you guys know what people need out there, right? And so I think marketing should be involved the whole time. So should be UX, so should be development because they know the constraints and the cost and all those things.
Yeah, and it's not like a hard line, right? So it's not like, okay, beta, stop. Beta after we take it. Like it is very fluid. I would just say it's more of a transition between the two as they come together before it goes to a GA or public.
I think this is talking largely about one of the biggest challenges organizations have, though. I mean, ours is market research first. I work within the market research organization too, and we determine what the pocket of consumers that we're going to go after is first, right? We're like, who are the buyers, and what are the types of core capabilities that we have that they would be interested in. But then we really have to work with UX and with our product organization to say, okay, how do we make a differentiated solution that's not like all of our competitors? And that's where we really have to lean on them to say like, hey, this is who we're talking about, and this is who's capable of buying our solutions. They have to then do a whole other level of research to understand like what type of differentiated solution would they still be interested in that's competitive. But I think the challenge is, and I think it's cool that your organization has it together, is leadership often doesn't see eye to eye, and it makes it inefficient over time. I could think of a number of cases where if we had better efficiency in research and UX and product development, that products, really good solutions that consumers could use would get out faster. So I think, the more that you can kind of understand both ballparks, it's really going to be effective for SaaS-based organizations anyways.
Marketing as, I have a question and I'll get to yours. Why don't you go first? You're the customers, you're the audience. Yeah. We're marketers.
This is kind of a general question. How do you align in the new product development process the marketing intelligence, the market research knowledge you bring in with their organizational capabilities, like capacities of your company? When you do bring in the knowledge of like that's what our competitors are doing, that's what our customers want, and if there is a discrepancy, at some point you realize we ain't there yet, we can do it. So what happens next?
I can take that. I will take that whole thing. So, so there's a lot there, obviously. A little bit more information about my team and how my team works, right? We're just there's about 5 or 6 of us, consumer intelligence team that sits in a much larger marketing organization. But our team is essentially the eyes and ears of at least the marketing organization, and almost, it's between us and UX research actually, that do the majority of the understanding of what's out there in the competitive space, right? So one of our managers within our team is mostly aligned to individual understanding of competitors, right? What's coming up in the future? What's the voice market look like? Like we know voice is here now, but what's next? AR, VR, like how does that get involved? We have no idea. But there's teams out there that are doing that further research, and their job, and a marketing team, and their job is to then come back to the product teams way early, UX research team way early, work with them to then understand, okay, is this something we should start working on? How do we start implementing this information into our systems? And if it is something that then is determined to be important or something we should make a bet on, then that gets put into its typical product flow pipeline that I was talking about earlier and kind of goes through the stages there. That's one specific piece. The other thing about like our individual customers, like what do they want? What are they asking for? That's also on our team directly. So we do a lot of research, not just from surveying, right? Every quarter we do these giant surveys to about 20,000 of our owners globally and get information about what they like, what they dislike, what's happening, what features would they like. And we take that information, that gets distilled again to pretty much the highest level of the company, and then it gets funneled down. A lot of the things we see coming up over and over again, some of the things I mentioned about voice, there's other product features and functionality we know about, But our team is the one that is in charge of understanding those needs and making sure that the people within the organization that need to know about it do, and really drive home that message there. So I hope that kind of got to your question.
A little bit. Yeah, one here.
On that note, I'm curious how the feedback loop works more on like the creative and messaging side, so within a marketing organization. If you guys are working on new product development that is potentially taking like a certain feature and like evolving a value proposition against it where we're going to differentiate ourselves in the market, how you work with the kind of messaging and brand teams to help kind of seed that in market, so that if you're intending to drive a change in perception or a different way of approaching something like the voice functionality, how soon and like how tight that feedback loop is, so that you know when it's appropriate to start talking about in market to kind of preempt that interest without sort of like getting into like a vaporware situation where you're like selling something that isn't quite backed yet, or you're not quite sure where the roadmap's going.
That's a great question. So for us, we do a tremendous amount. There's a few things there, so I'm going to try to break it down. So the first is in regards to like how do we understand what's happening. Like we do a tremendous amount of actual testing of any and all creative and ads that are being presented out there, right? Whether it be 30-second spots, 2-minute spots, whatever. All that goes through not just typical types of research with people in a focus group, but also we use tools that it gets deployed to these samples. We measure different kinds of information like heart rate and feel and eyeball tracking and everything you could imagine. That gets all tracked together, and we use that as a way to then figure out what type of creative is working, what isn't, what parts of it should we maybe ramp up or ramp down, and that's how we kind of work on that. It is very much an art and a science, mind you. So there's also this, I don't want to say a divide because that's too strong, but there's the creative side of the org, right? The ones that just want to make something. And then there's the data people that want to just really have the decisions based on information and numbers. And you have to meet somewhere in the middle, right? And that's kind of, our CMO actually recently did a presentation. I was at a panel similar to this about that very topic for about an hour, talking about how to blend those two, because it is very difficult, but we try to do a little bit of both. To your second point about vaporware / when is it ready or when should you do these things, I'm not sure. It really comes down to, and this might sound like a cop-out, but it really comes down to understanding your market and your core audience, right? So we have like a definition of who, we call it our audience technically, like who this group or segmentation of people are and what they're doing and what they would like, and if understanding the market there. Voice, for example, the US market right now, I think the ownership of voice last time we checked was 18% of US households, which technically in the innovation curve is pretty early, right? That's like early majority, no, not even, forget it. But it's 18%, it's been a while, all right, so, but I know it's early. So it's, but my point is, it's nowhere near, it's before the chasm, it's nowhere near the majority yet, right? So the situation is like with voice even, how do we best message and understand to educate the consumers out there? Because maybe our target audience knows about it, we use it every day, you know, but maybe the general population doesn't. And so one thing we found with voice, for example, and I can't get into details specifically, but like we do know that a lot of these products, you know, are not necessarily meeting the experiential bar, and that's due to the lack of education, understanding, and knowledge of those people out there, right? Non-techie people, or people that are not necessarily first adopters of technology, might have higher expectations for how these things work or how they're supposed to work. And so for voice, for example, it's riding that wave and figuring it out. I know it's kind of a circle answer, but.
I could just add a little piece to that too. Sure. Sorry. So I think to your first part, because I can speak to that the most, like that's probably 60% of my job is just trying to align all the teams to the profile of the consumer that we're trying to speak to. And you think when you're done researching, you say like, hey, these are our target consumers, like these are the people that we're going to do all of our pricing, packaging, messaging, and push the brand towards, that would be the alignment and you're done. But it's a constant process of making sure people are aligned. And our creative and our marketing messaging teams have to be a central part of the research, I think. So what we really emphasize is having leadership buy-in across those teams as we do market research, so they walk away with a tangible profile, and they can also insert, hey, we need to know these 5 things about consumers in order for us to create something that's effective. And the second piece of that is competitive as well, right? So Constant Contact, I think of Constant Contact in this case because MailChimp was the rising star when Constant Contact was the incumbent, and MailChimp is huge now. They're a massive company. And they went with this really edgy, like loose millennial marketing campaign for a long time and still are riding that. So we also have to be aware of what our competitors are doing from a messaging and positioning perspective and constantly track that and how that changes, because that shows us what white space exists for us. Because otherwise we could go with this brand message we think fits for our consumers and look just like somebody else, which isn't going to work. So we really try to do a good job when we start doing market research of saying, hey, this is what the process is going to be and we need your feedback on these points, so that way your team can really be effective and efficient in delivering something that matters. So for us anyways, that's a big part of it.
So we're getting to my question, the one I was going to ask before. You used the word product, you used the word price, you used the word segment, target, and positioning, which made me happy. When you took marketing at Bentley, I assume you did, you learned the 4 Ps, and you learned about segmenting, targeting, and positioning. Now you've transformed, marketing has changed. Are those 4 Ps and segmenting, targeting, positioning still relevant? And if so, in what ways? And if they're not relevant, in what ways aren't they relevant?
I can talk about the ACT. Yes, they're extremely relevant for us. Competitive landscaping, pricing, promotion. As I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of concept testing, which includes price sensitivity usually as well, even from initial development till later on. And if for some reason a product line is dropping with us, we'll do testing as well and figure out, are we positioned incorrectly? So yes, pricing is key for us. We have competitors that come up all the time and they do things for free. So we need to make sure that we are aligned with who's out there, especially from a B2B side, which is schools and districts, as well from a B2C side, which is consumers, which is students and parents. And typically for us, parents are buying the assessment information for students, not students. So yeah, I think it's extremely relevant even with us today.
Yeah, I would agree. The one thing I think I would consider possibly adding, if it's not really that bullish right now in academics, is, and it's kind of what I talked about in my slides, is more experience-based. So all the Ps are very important for all the reasons that you've already outlined, but the experience for us at least, like that's a way that we are able to differentiate and understand how do we, it's more about positioning, right? Like how do we use our experience as a positioning tool to best figure out how we can not only compete with these brands, but also figure out the experience that we want from these owners or whoever actually buys our things, that we better that experience. Then as marketers, we can then extend that consumer lifetime value and everything there. So that would be my maybe addition to the Ps. For P&Es, I don't know. But.
Well, everyone wants to interject the word experience.
Yes.
My particular expertise is retailing, so
Yes.
I get experience to death, but it certainly is relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely overused, for sure. But I mean,
but it
really,
needs to be used.
Yeah,
as
but
well.
it's, I'm not saying that at the level of just being fruitless with it. Like really not just user experience, like really driving that message of having that a core competency of your company and what you're doing, because it's really critical if you do it right, and it can hurt you if you don't.
I think a lot of the differentiation in the market is the experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's our biggest challenge as a software company. Like, we're solving the same problem. Like, if you go to Shopify, Constant Contact, GoDaddy, like, all of these people are just trying to start a small business and sell something. Like, so the ones that they're going to stick with are the ones that have the best experience, and we're very aware of that. So I think it's a really important thing, because we really have to differentiate on that, not necessarily always the product that's behind it.
Right. Yes. Do we have time for more questions? One more. One or two more questions. We have one here.
Since today's topic is new product development, so I'm just curious, maybe how different is the current new product development from the past, say 10 years ago, and maybe in future when you can update the entire product development processes, maybe which specific steps are getting more important? I guess maybe experience is one of it.
I mean, for us, I don't know about 10 years ago because I wasn't working in research 10 years ago, but I mean, last year we focused on these design sprints and we had to come up with 50 concepts in 1 year and try push so many products out. I mean, we're not doing that this year. I mean, we're doing design sprints still, but we want to launch 2 to 4, right, or new enhancements. So for us, it's to continue, when you look at the design sprint model, agile model, the pivot, right? Let's pivot and make sure that what we're working on is going to make us money and is relevant out there in the industry. And for us, you know, our CFO, you know, at the summit that we had in May said, if you're working on something and your gut says, this stinks, this isn't going to go anywhere, escalate it. Because there's, you know, even with the best people and the best teams, I mean, we have products that should have been sunsetted years ago. And we recommended that and they weren't, and they were huge money losses to us. So from what you're saying, I think it's faster recognition of what needs to change and go forward. I mean, and that's constantly something that we have to work on.
Yeah, I think for new product development, we haven't talked too much about this side of it, but we have a small innovation team actually on the UX side too that like looks at like the ideal world in 10 years, and they constantly rev on just different ideas for that. And I think that's really important actually because, you know, we talk about, you know, packaging, pricing, positioning. That's all like real world today. Like we have to get that right to compete, right? But when you're doing that on a day-to-day basis, it's very easy to lose sight of the future, and you can very quickly become, you know, second, third, fourth place in your market because you're not innovating fast enough. And that's one of the challenges that we're really trying to solve for now as well as an organization is how do we know that the jobs that people are trying to do as a small business largely aren't changing, but we need to get ahead of technology and find ways to make the things that they're doing a lot simpler and a lot easier. And a lot of times that comes with partnerships that come out of nowhere as well too, right? Like you might not think that like, you know, automated vehicles makes any sense for email marketing or speakers or phones or hardware like that, but we have to look at all those things because you never know where those things might end up converging in the marketplace. So we have a team that's dedicated to kind of testing all of these kind of goofy concepts, which I think is really interesting, right? So if some of you are super creative, I would say this to students who like that, you know, there's a place in the market for you right now to try and combine and converge technologies and make a meaningful product on the other side. Because that's really where innovation is coming from, right? Is 3 companies do something really well, and 1 company says, hey, we could do those 3 things together and it'd be really neat. So that's definitely a big piece of it as well.
For us at Sonos, so I've mentioned the hardware piece often, right? But there's also another component to our platform that's software. And every quarter, roughly, there's a new update to your, just like every app, right? You get a new version of the Sonos experience. The thing about the Sonos app that's a little bit more difficult is that we have hardware and we have software. So you control the actual hardware from your phone or whatever you're using. The hardware uses firmware, right? So that's a little bit more of so just bear with me. So you have 5 Sonos speakers at your house, right? You get an update. You have to then use the controller to update your controller updates, and then every one of those 5 speakers has to then go through its own feedback loop and update, right? So that's like a full-blown experience. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that in regards to new product experience, in the past, again, 10 years ago, like you, or whoever asked the question, you did, 10 years ago, when we had these new releases that came out, you know, we didn't really hear anything. Like the feedback loop was pretty soft, if not just from the number of people, but also the frequency, the quickness of that information, because you'd have to go out there and actually seek it out, right, and figure out what's going on. Now, when we push out a release, you know pretty much instantly what's going on. You know, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever channel it is, you know, it's large and it's public and it's in your face. And I think that we've seen that time and time again. It's not really like a new tool, but it's just a new part of the actual ecosystem now that exists that didn't beforehand, that you have to pay attention to what's actually happening out there. Because if you do put something out there that's not working as anticipated, or if it's worse than before, you're going to have to scramble and make new updates quicker, faster. You know, maybe you scrap the update altogether. That didn't exist 10 years ago, and now we have to deal with that pretty much on a day-to-day basis.
That's it? Okay. Thank you so much. That was very enlightening.